Welcome back to Askewed Reviews. And this week I'm doing movies in honor of Memorial Day. And today, as a viewer request, I have the 1967 film, The Dirty Dozen. Here is your trivia question for today. For the final mission of the film, there is a 16-step rhyme created by the Major. What is the only step that doesn't rhyme? The answer will be at the end of this episode. This film takes place in 1944 during World War II. General Worden is notified of a mission that may help America out, but can't be done by regular soldiers due to the rules of war. So he enlists the help of Major Reisman, who is sent to a military prison and will assemble a team of 12 prisoners that are either on death row or have long sentences. But if they're willing to train and do a mission for America, they'll all be set free. So Reisman puts them through a tough and rigorous commando training process, where during it we discover that there are some in this group that will actually be helpful and some that may end up hindering. So, will they be able to complete their mission of parachuting down into German occupied France, find their way to a German run chateau, infiltrate it, take out all of their communications, trap the enemy within, and then finally blow up the chateau? And even if this ragtag group of misfits manages to complete their mission, will they all make it back home? This movie was directed by Robert Aldrich. The story comes from a novel of the same name written by E.M. Nathanson. And Nathanson was inspired by an actual 101st Airborne Division paratrooper group called the Filthy 13. The original working title for the film was Operation Dirty Dozen. The movie was entirely filmed in England. The entire cast learned judo and commando techniques for this film. Most of the actors were actually 10 to 20 years older than their characters. 7 of the actors from this film actually served in World War II. Lee Marvin was in the Marines, Telly Savalas was in the Army, Charles Bronson was in the Army, Ernest Borgnine was in the Navy, Clint Walker was a merchant marine, Robert Ryan was in the Marines, and George Kennedy was in the Army. Lee Marvin was apparently a big issue during filming, due to his drinking problem, mild racism, the fact that he would just disappear from set at times, and he would constantly talk about how it wasn't a real war movie. Lee Marvin was not the original actor offered the role of Major Reisman. It was originally offered to John Wayne, who turned it down, and then Kirk Douglas, who also turned it down. Telly Savalas plays the character of Archer Maggot, but that role was originally offered to Jack Palance, who also turned it down. Apparently, both Muhammad Ali and Woody Allen would visit the set during filming. The film production ran over schedule, which ended up causing a couple issues for a few of the actors in the film. Jim Brown, for instance, was in danger of missing training camp for the NFL. The NFL threatened to fine and suspend Brown if he didn't leave filming immediately and report to camp. Brown then announced his retirement from football. At the time, Brown was considered one of the best in the game. When production did run over schedule, Trini Lopez worried about his music career, so he tried to see if he could get more money, which didn't end up happening. So he asked his friend Frank Sinatra for some advice. Sinatra suggested that he quit the production, that way his recording career wouldn't lose momentum. So Lopez did just that, which is sad because apparently his character was going to have a much larger role near the end of the film, but this is the reason why Jimenez is actually the character who dies from the parachute jump. The fake general scene with Donald Sutherland was originally supposed to be played by Clint Walker, but he was apparently uncomfortable with the scene, so Sutherland did it instead. Which is interesting, as apparently this scene is what got Sutherland his role in the film MASH. There was technically a pseudo reunion of sorts with George Kennedy, Clint Walker, Ernest Borgnine, and Jim Brown, as all of them voiced soldiers in the film Small Soldiers. The chateau from this movie was actually constructed for the film. It is one of the largest sets ever built, at 240 feet across and 50 feet high. There were actually 3 sequels made from this film. All 3 of them were made for TV, and you can bet your ass that I'm going to be doing reviews for all 3 of them. There was even a Dirty Dozen television series, but it was short lived and only had one season. In 2019, there was talks of a remake with David Ayer as the director. There was a comic book version of the film made by Dell Comics in 1967. Marvel Comics actually had two comic book series that were inspired by this film. One of them was Combat Kelly and the Deadly Dozen, and the second was Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos. The DC comic book series Suicide Squad was also inspired by this film. So when it comes to the film The Dirty Dozen, I really like this movie. One of my favorite parts about it is just the fact that whether you like or hate a character, pretty much everyone is on the chopping block and they may be taken out of the story. And even though most of this movie is very improbable and most of the characters are just actual scumbags, it's still a lot of fun to watch. So I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 5. Now, if you do like the film The Dirty Dozen, not only are there so many movies like it, there are so many movies that were inspired by it. But here's ones that I suggest checking out. Either the original or remake of The Longest Yard, either the original or remake of Ocean's 11, the first or second Suicide Squad movies, The Wild Bunch, and Kelly's Heroes. And now it's time for the trivia question from the beginning of this episode. For the final mission of the film, there is a 16-step rhyme created by the Major. What is the only step that doesn't rhyme? So out of all the 16 steps, technically the only one that doesn't rhyme is number 14, as 14:00 Jimenez cuts the cable, Franco cuts the phone. None of that actually rhymes. All the rest of them do, with 1 and begun, 2 and through, 3 and spree, 4 and door, 5 and drive, 6 and fix, 7 and heaven, 8 and date, 9 and line, 10 and pen, 11 and 7, 12 and delve, 13 and scene, 14 doesn't, 15 and bean, 16 and Halloween. So clearly 15 is a bit iffy as well, but technically it does work. And if you didn't know, this kind of rhyming sequence to remember everything is something that Lee Marvin would actually do with his own soldiers. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Askewed Reviews, and if there's a movie you'd like to see get a review, just mention it in the comments.